President Trump, chummy with MBS, Israel's concerns about the qualitative military edge, and we need some laughs. A conversation with the comic genius Alex Edelman is coming up. It's Unholy. I'm Yonit Levy in Tel Aviv.
And I'm Jonathan Friedland in London. It's Unholy, two Jews on the news. We're both now back, aren't we, in our respective normal places, having been
We are.
globe-trotting and crisscrossing the US. We're both now back in our usual positions.
Yes, it feels so regular. I wish the news was sort of regular for a moment, but it isn't. But we should say that we have been globe-trotting because both of us were promoting our respective books. We should say that Jonathan's fabulous book, The Traitor's Circle, is now also in your feed, Unholy listeners. You can listen to the opening sections of that wonderful book, narrated by the author himself, which I always find a lovely experience. So you could get that. That is dropped this week. And also to any of our listeners, there could be a few thinking that we are very self-involved with our own books. We should say that coming up in the next few weeks, conversations with other authors about their books as well.
There are other authors. There are other books, are there? That's a revelation.
And they're even pretty good.
Have been like, we've only been talking about our own, but you're right. We will have conversations with other authors about other books in the coming weeks. So you were talking about the news, and it was sort of arresting seeing Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, feted in Washington. I mean, for people concerned with the region, with Israel in particular, there was so much to talk about because of, this sort of red carpet treatment given to him and the promise, well, we'll get into the details of it, but the promise of, military hardware that has previously been seen as the sort of preserve of Israel, meaning that the American generosity militarily has always been directed, number one, in the region to Israel. And suddenly it looks like Washington has, a new best friend, is what it looked like. And just to clarify what we mean, I mean, it is a matter of law. The United States Congress passed a while ago a law that guaranteed so-called QME, a qualitative military edge to Israel. Amazing idea of this legislation that Congress said, whatever the United States gives to other countries, Israel always has to have better. It's like the sort of most favored nation status, but instead of trade, military equipment. And it seemed as if Donald Trump just drove a coach and horses right through that promise as he lavished American largesse on MBS.
Yes, I think largesse is actually the operative word in all of this event. You said a red carpet. It was a very shiny red carpet laid in front of Mohammed bin Salman in Washington this week. Indeed. So the focus of the discussion, of course, the fact that Donald Trump decided to sell to the Saudis the F-35 jets. And as you mentioned, a decision made by the White House and Congress is that Israel needs the qualitative military edge. What stands in the background historically is the assistance the Soviets gave Egypt during the Yom Kippur War. Following that, an understanding in the U.S. that Israel is a liberal democracy in the Middle East, its survival considered vital to U.S. interests. And since it is situated in a neighborhood in which some countries call for its destruction and act upon this notion, Israel must be able to defend itself militarily, hence have a military advantage and the back of the United States. So that is the declared policy of the U.S., and that the decision made by Donald Trump, it looks like, again, from the Israeli perspective, that what he has decided is that the QME is not to be taken into consideration in arms sales in the region. That is one concerning fact. The other is that it was always considered in the recent years when the discussion about normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia was on the table, it was always considered that this is a condition, right? If Saudi Arabia moves forward with a recognition or some sort of normalization with in its relationship with Israel, then this will be the grand prize. And now, again, in Israeli eyes, what is happening is that Saudi Arabia is receiving the grand prize without essentially paying anything in that currency of normalization. So it hasn't been a very good week when you look at it from the Israeli perspective at this visit in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been looking absolutely rightly through the lens of the Israel-US relationship. And from that point of view, it is a real break from the previous thinking. As you say, Saudi Arabia will get all the benefits of normalization without doing the normalization. And I think it now means there's a huge change in the incentive structure when you think about the possibility of a breakthrough in Saudi-Israel relationship, recognition, and so on. It was always assumed that, of course, Saudi Arabia would want to do what had to be done, because how else could it get all the goodies from the Americans? Here's Donald Trump saying you can have the goodies anyway. It makes me wonder what would incentivize Saudi Arabia now. There are incentives to do with intelligence cooperation, which, by the way, it does already. Perhaps economic ties, but the reward is now much less for Saudi Arabia, and therefore their incentive to moderate or soften or give ground on what has always been their condition, which is we won't normalize with you, Israel, until there are essentially two states, a Palestinian state alongside Israel. Previously, people have thought, look, they can fudge that. They can nibble away at the language. They can give ground on that because they will want to, because normalization is such a huge prize, it was always assumed, because how else can they unlock all the gifts of an American administration? So the incentive structure has radically altered now because they have no reason to shift ground on recognition of Israel or shift ground on a Palestinian state, because they've got all the prizes anyway. And I think that is a big change. And you saw that, in the remarks made by MBS himself when he was asked about this during his White House meeting with Donald Trump. And he he said, yes, Saudi Arabia wants to join the Abraham Accords, which is alternative language for saying recognition of Israel and normalization, joining those other Gulf states and Arab states who have relations with Israel, but said, we want to be part of the Abraham Accords, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path towards a two-state solution, is what he said in response to the question. In other words, he doesn't have to give ground. There has to be that Palestinian state. And in a way, if Israel doesn't want to do it, then he can sort of shrug and walk away because he's got what he wanted from the whole thing. Anyway, I think that is a huge change. I think you're right to say not a good week for Israel, but also in a way not a good week specifically for Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, because his whole calculus had been that he could play hard to get with the Saudis on this, because he thought they needed that American hardware, and therefore he could hang tough and get these Saudis to back down on Palestinian statehood. The events of this week suggest, no way, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as you mentioned, it's Mohammed bin Salman saying very clearly in the Oval Office, in his own voice, we need a secure, clear path toward a two-state solution before there is a normalization. Thus far, we have heard these similar things from the Saudi ambassador to Washington and the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, but this is him saying it in his own voice, and we will connect it in a minute to what the UN resolution of this week was, again, the issue of a Palestinian state. I do want to raise just one sort of asterisk here, and the question of how long it will take for these planes to arrive, and will they indeed arrive in Saudi Arabia. We should, I think, just remind ourselves the fact that the UAE also had that part of the deal, the F-35 jets. It was then Netanyahu sort of denying that he agreed to this, and then it was, I think, revealed by Nahum Barnea of Yediot Ahronot newspaper that he indeed did agree to that. But it was the Biden administration after the first Trump tenure that blocked it. Not only, we should say, in the corridors of the Biden administration, it was not only mentioned that it's because of Israel's QME, but also in a way because of the US's QME. And in that regard, the fear was leakage of technology to countries that aren't allies of the United States, and that's why that was blocked. So it is a question whether those planes, it will take a while for them to arrive, whether they will ever arrive. But again, as we said, it's a worrying thing for Israel, just the fact that the president of the United States is sitting in the Oval Office and says, as far as I'm concerned, Israel and Saudi Arabia are both at a level where they should get top of the line. That is not what
Yeah.
Israel wants to hear.
So you just a couple of things on that. You're absolutely right to mention America's own qualitative military edge over China, very specifically. And that is, as you absolutely say, why there was the block on F-35s to United Arab Emirates, the fear they would share technology with the Chinese. And the other bit of parity here is that Donald Trump is saying that the pact he wants to seal with Saudi Arabia would be to make them this particular status, which is as a sort of non-NATO partner, meaning Qatar got this deal as well, where you're elevated above other allies as if on a par with America's NATO allies, even if you're not part of NATO. So suddenly Qatar, Saudi Arabia are as close militarily as a Britain or a Germany is with the United States. That's
although if Congress doesn't ratify that, that doesn't really hold.
So I was going to get to this about
declarative,
Congress, because that qualitative military edge policy has been there, as you said, for decades, and it's something which isn't just at the whim of a president. It's up to Congress whether they feel happy about putting Israel and Saudi Arabia on a par and suddenly making Israel no longer ahead of the queue and sort of top of the pile. Until this week, I would have said, well, we all know the answer to that. Congress allowed Donald Trump to do whatever he wants to do. It's made itself a rubber stamp body. Republican majorities in the House and in the Senate do whatever he asks. This week, they challenged Donald Trump and forced him to back down over the Epstein files, where in the end he made what may turn out to be a tactical retreat. He told them to vote to release the files, even days after he'd said you must never release the files. I say tactical because I think in the end the files he doesn't want released won't be released. There's all kinds of caveats and get-out clauses. Put that to one side. The point is, enough Republican members of the House lost their fear of Donald Trump, essentially, and were ready to vote against him, which is why he had to change his tune. I just wonder if there will be enough Republicans who will say, hold on, we want you to keep Israel first. Now, for that to fully work, you'd have to have Democrats agreeing with them, who would also be ready to challenge the president on this. I don't know if any of that will happen. They may just be the usual rubber stamp and roll over. There'll be plenty of Democrats who will not particularly want to go to the mat fighting for Israel's military superiority in the region, given everything the last 2 years. But it's just no longer as certain that Donald Trump can absolutely just trample over previous conventions and norms and have the Congress ignore it as it was a few days ago. I would put it no stronger than that, but it's just, as you said, a sort of asterisk worth putting on that, that things have changed a little in the dynamic between the two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it hasn't been generally a good week for the president. I think he was also a little bit antsy in the sort of comments, a little bit, I'm being understated here, to the press in that conversation with MBS. Remind us of the Epstein files, of course, also. The stock market was not having a great week in the U.S. All this into consideration of his week, not a great week, again, for the Israeli leader in that regard. The only one who seemed to be having a ball was MBS, who was, of course, his record completely cleared of anything problematic. When ABC reporter tried to ask about the Khashoggi, the violent death of a Washington Post columnist Khashoggi at a Saudi consulate, of course, American intelligence saying the attack was carried out on the Crown Prince's orders. Mr. Trump kind of berating her, saying, you don't have to embarrass our guest. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman you were talking about. So that is, I think, part of what is happening here after many years in which he was not even allowed in the White House since 2018. Of course, the complete clearing of his record.
Yeah, and let's just pause on that. How shocking that is. I mean, extraordinarily, it was MBS who used slightly. I mean, it was transparent, but it was slightly the language of contrition, saying it's painful and we want to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. It would obviously been scripted and sort of lawyered, as it were, that line that he offered. But he at least acknowledged that something implied that something bad had happened and that it was better if it didn't happen again. Trump, it was outrageous what he did. He tried to play down the significance of it and to blame the victim, to suggest by saying there were people who didn't like that man, as you quoted, was to suggest somehow Khashoggi was to partly responsible or culpable for his own death, cleaning up for the man who was known for a while as Mohammed Bonesaw, MBS, because of the brutal treatment of Khashoggi and apparently reportedly and when we say reportedly, it's not the media who said this, it was America's own intelligence community found that MBS bore direct responsibility for the killing and cutting up of the body of a journalist. And it is shocking to see an American president in the Oval Office try and clean that up when the man himself, fingered for the crime, at least said, we've had to face up to some painful things and we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. Just, we always often, let these things pass just because we've got so used to them. But it was a new low, and I think worth recording.
Yes, and I think we should also say that Mary Bruce, the ABC White House correspondent, when he asked her about, she asked him about Epstein, also kind of said, you're a terrible journalist, and I think ABC is a crappy company, and the network's broadcasting license should be taken away. Again, an American president saying all this. Perhaps we've normalized this already, but we should pause for a moment on how, sort of abnormal this is, or out of the normal range.
In the same week, he said to another journalist, also a woman, "Quiet piggy," as if a remark about, one presumes, about her looks. So it's all part of the picture of Donald Trump, and perhaps goes to your point about him seeming rattled this week.
Yes, I think the Epstein story is really ruffling his feathers. I think that's what we're seeing in front of the camera. In any case, we want to move on to the UN Security Council that adopting Trump's Gaza plan. I have to say, first of all, essentially saying the United States will for 2 years be responsible, governing Gaza, in charge of the security, in charge of this international force that is supposed to demilitarize Hamas. I'm still pretty murky on the details, but I think it is important to say that this right-wing government said not a lot in a week in which the UN accepts this draft, in which in Article 19 it says, while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA, Palestinian Authority Reform Program, is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people.
Yeah. I mean, this is the consequence of Netanyahu's strategic decision to put all his eggs in the Trump basket. He's bet on Donald Trump. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. And because this is the Trump plan, he could not be seen to be opposing it. We both know that if the same plan with the same language had come before the UN at any other time, but without Trump's stamp on it, you would have been hearing fire and brimstone from Israeli diplomats who would have been denouncing it. How dare they? This is a reward for terror. The UN has lost its mind. It should be dissolved tomorrow. They would be saying all that. But they can't say that now because this is an American plan. I find it interesting. It's a success for Donald Trump. We are very quick. I am, particularly in my writing and elsewhere, to slam him. He deserves yet more credit for this, because to have what began as just his own initiative, almost as if delivered off the cuff in the Oval Office, is now the adopted policy of the international community. That is a diplomatic victory for him. There was some commentary around saying the Chinese and Russians didn't veto this because they thought, this is going to fail anyway. Why expend diplomatic or political capital blocking it? Let it just unravel. I think that's a misreading. This is now not just the US whose fingerprints are on this. This is now a UN and a Chinese and Russian backed. I think they abstained, so they could claim some deniability. But this is now ever so slightly on the international community. They can't. It's not completely cost-free for them to let this fail and just sort of implode. that that ever so slightly increases its chances of success. There are so many questions, as you say, about the vague language. Again, though, the counter argument will be that's a strength, because if there's vagueness, there's wiggle room. In terms of how you get to disarmament. The people I speak to about this have always said that disarmament is likely, if it's ever going to happen, of Hamas, to be the last thing that happens. Once other stages have been completed, once Hamas think that either they're out of options or other goals have been achieved. For example, Israel is out completely of Gaza, or there is some kind of Palestinian self-rule. It comes towards the end of the process, not the beginning. That's definitely not how Israelis see it. But, there's a question, for example, about this international stabilization force. Who exactly is going to do that? There's talk of Indonesia being willing to send 20,000 people, but they don't want to do that if that means being in confrontation with Hamas and forcibly arming them. No one is volunteering to do that, to fight Hamas and take their guns off them. So there's 100 questions at least coming out of this, but it's elevated after this week in its status. It's no longer just Trump's fancy or fantasy. It is now the adopted policy of the international community, and so that again changes some of the kind of incentive structures around it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see the sort of Netanyahu talking points of people around him saying, it's not such a big deal. Essentially, the Palestinian state was part of the original Trump plan, the Kushner plan of the first Trump administration. This could take a long time. The kind of not taking this resolution too seriously. At the end of the day, we should say two things. The government that is called in Israel, I'll say this in Hebrew, Yemin Male Male, which means complete and total right-wing government. There's no centrist element, there's no left-wing element in this government. Said nothing, including Smotrich and Ben Gvir, when this resolution passed, including this kind of promise for a Palestinian state, and is saying nothing when there's actually American headquarters in Kiryat Gat, a southern city in Israel, that is calling the shots in the Gaza Strip. This is the situation we are at. And you can say a lot of things about how this will eventually lead to a Palestinian state. But the point is that this is the government who accepted this decision this week.
Yeah, no, that's why I say that Trump can regard this as a diplomatic success. His word, this Trump plan, is now international law as well by being adopted. And he has managed to get Netanyahu and his right-wing government to accept indirectly, vaguely, perhaps even indefinitely, the principle, anyway, of a Palestinian state. He has them under his thumb, and that is the consequence of their bet that they made, which is to put all their chips on Donald Trump. He now knows that they have nowhere else to go. It's exactly the reverse of the situation that obtained with Biden, when they always could cross the road and go to Donald Trump. There is nowhere else for Netanyahu and his cabinet to go. And Trump, again, I would say to his credit, in a perverse way, he's using that leverage.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing a lot of compliments from Jonathan Friedland to Donald Trump this week. I hope our listeners are taking note as well.
I also did say it was a new low, and the man reaches ever more discreditable levels of human behavior. So I think we're covering the whole waterfront today.
He's a mixed bag. I think that is the conclusion we should arrive at. In the meantime, look, it does seem like, at least on the ground, the ceasefire, sort of fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, is still stable. Hamas is definitely testing the boundaries quite literally. We should say Israel is still held in a position that is the sort of yellow line demarcating the fact that Israel still holds, the IDF still holds about 50% of the Gaza Strip. And it really is not clear, even not in the UN resolution, when Israel needs to withdraw and how does this correlate with Hamas's disarmament. But we will say that there have been a few incidents in which Hamas was shooting at the IDF soldiers in that area, also coming very near to them in that area, and Israel reacting rather aggressively, as if to say, these are the new rules that we are stabilizing as we speak, and Israel will react aggressively so as not to find itself in the same position that it was on October 6th, kind of saying Hamas is deterred, we don't want a war with Hamas. Israel is trying to show its enemies that it is less afraid than it used to be. I think we should also mention that today on Thursday, 18 hostages that have been released recently in the last deal in October, 18 out of the 20 will be traveling to President Trump to meet him, to say thank you for what he did. There are still 3 bodies held by Hamas. Also, I think it's important to mention the testimony, really harrowing testimony of Guy Gilboa Dalal, who was released last month, and he tells of sexual assault that he experienced from his Hamas captor. Rather in detail, we should say. This will air on my network, Channel 12, on Saturday. But I think that is also important to mention. This is what these people went through for 2 years. And, at least the Israeli public is not forgetting that.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, and I'm sure the testimony will be harrowing. It reminds me of something that was said to me very soon after October the 7th by one of Israel's leading historians, who said the word to use is violation, and he meant it in referring to the incursion into Israel, but he also said that the sexual crimes that were committed on October the 7th, he said, were sort of emblematic, the sense that Israelis had felt violated. And I remember him saying that from what he was hearing, there were sexual crimes committed against women, but also against men. And he said that the details of this will come out, and I think obviously they are. But it was sort of, as I say, emblematic of a sense that Israel had been violated. And every time these stories emerge, it increases that feeling. Just on the exchanges that happened earlier this week, I think it was on Wednesday, that Israel said Hamas had opened fire on Israeli troops operating in the south, that they had violated the ceasefire, and they hit back and killed 22 people, according to Gaza's civil defense agency, which obviously is still in the hands of Hamas. What is I mean, that's not nothing, that kind of exchange. That is a substantial number of people. It's a serious military episode. And if you imagine it happening before October 7th, that would be major news that had happened. It makes me wonder if this is going to become a bit like the arrangement that is holding in the north, in Lebanon, whereby, with really a sort of green light from the Americans, if Israel feels Hezbollah is out of line, it hits back and does it whenever it wants to, and doesn't really regard that as a break or a violation of the ceasefire. Mm-hmm. And I sort of think things like what happened on Wednesday, if that becomes the norm, that could be what we're looking at. And this was such a big battle within Netanyahu's coalition. Will we have the right to go back in and hit back if we want to? Or do we have to say that the war is 100% over? And what you realize is there can be this in-between state where there is a ceasefire, but Israel, whenever it wants to, can hit back, and hit back quite hard. That's my point. It's been doing that against Hezbollah in the north, in Lebanon. And I think just Wednesday's episode, the fact that it didn't really earn much more than a sort of note from the international media, certainly from the Americans, that may be the pattern we're looking at. That, you might want to call it attritional warfare. You may just say Israel has retained its room for maneuver and room to act in Gaza, despite there being a ceasefire.
I would want to turn our gaze, Jonathan, to something that has been happening in this country in recent weeks, perhaps recent months, but we should talk about it, I think, and focus on it. It's this sort of uptick in threats against journalists in this country. On Wednesday this week, a threatening graffiti was found painted outside the offices of Channel 13, their news networks in Tel Aviv. And what was written, I think it's important to read out in translation what was spray painted. It said, "The blood of the traitors will be cleared for publication." That's a paraphrasing of what the IDF usually says when it announces the death of the soldier. It says it has been cleared for publication to say that. You don't even need to know the context to understand that if someone spray paints on the offices of a news network the words "the blood of the traitors," that is a severe uptick in the rhetoric against journalists in the country. In addition to that, we should tell our listeners that my colleague on Channel 12, the legal affairs analyst Guy Peleg, has been under attack. Guy is the person who aired the leaked footage of the Sde Teiman detention holding facility depicting the soldiers' alleged abuse of a Palestinian detainee. He's also a fierce critic of Netanyahu in his reporting. He has been walking around with security detail, indeed people, physically coming very close to him. Last week, he was hounded by a group of people who tried to block him from reaching his car and had to have police escort to return safely home. Signs that have been hung saying he needs to go to jail. This is all a very, very worrying development. The Israeli TV channels forum, which includes my channel, Channel 12, Channel 13, and Channel 11, which is the public broadcaster, is calling this an incitement against journalists and a threat against free speech. I think it's also important to mention in this context that there were threats online against Channel 14 presenters as well. They are the channel that is usually seen as the mouthpiece for Netanyahu. Also, our analyst Amit Segal, his car was blocked and on his way to the studio. He's also receiving a lot of vile comments. What I want to say in all this is basically this. Look, a healthy democracy is a democracy in which journalists don't walk around with security detail. And a healthy democracy is one in which journalists do not need to think twice before they open their mouth and speak their mind. And I wish things would calm down. I fear that the exact opposite will happen as Israel is in an election year. We discussed at length the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin this month, 30 years ago. That indeed is our bonus episode this week. I don't want to be at all dark, but we in this country have seen where incitement can lead and how it leads to violence. And I really hope that we are not seeing that right now in front of our eyes.
Yeah, I would echo that. And it's becoming a theme, isn't it, of this episode? The abuse directed at journalists, in the United States case, coming very directly from the president. But here you're charting some really troubling developments. And, we know, exactly as you say, that some of this stuff doesn't stay at the level of graffiti and online messaging. It only takes one person to take this stuff literally. You mentioned the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, which we talked about at length in the bonus episode. The part of the problem was that those people in authority, leaders, politicians, didn't sufficiently tamp down what was being said in the public conversation. Of course, long before social media, 30 years ago. Is there any messaging coming from the sort of political echelon to try and calm this down? Are the flames of it being fanned by politicians? Are they saying enough's enough? What messaging, if anything, what are politicians saying about this stuff?
Israel is a very torn country, and I think you astutely commented last week that now that it seems like the external threats have at least died down a bit, then Israel is now looking inwards, and it realizes that the sort of internal rift is not ameliorated. The point is to say that it sadly depends on kind of which camp you come from. So what you hear from the sort of anti-Bibi camp is denouncing this full-throated in every single way. What you hear from Netanyahu and his supporters is, yes, this is terrible, but why didn't you say anything when journalists from the other side, so to speak, were attacked as well? That's why I was trying to just say, look, everyone should calm down. This cannot be the new normal in this country, again, in which journalists need to walk around with security detail because they're fearing for their lives or fearing someone will do harm to them. That is just not the way we can live in this country, full stop.
Well, I echo that wholeheartedly. This is a trend that is worrying and needs to be absolutely nipped in the bud. It's a frightening time.
I think that what we need at this point in our show is a change of pace and to hear from someone who can bring a smile to our face, the conversation we had recently on our live show, in New York.
Our next guest is a superstar of comedy. His one-man show, Just For Us, was a Broadway smash. The TV special of Just For Us won an Emmy, and last year Time magazine named him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. His new show is What Are You Gonna Do? So please, a big, unholy welcome for Alex Edelman.
What's going on?
How is life? Look, we had an argument how to open this because Jonathan wanted to ask you about the difference between New York Jews and LA Jews. You've been spending a lot of time in LA, right?
Yes.
But I was just going to say, as the only Jewish mother on stage tonight, Alex, have you eaten anything? You look a little pale.
Oh, thanks a lot. I mean, the difference between New York Jews and LA Jews is I think LA Jews are more sanguine and accepting of the fact that they don't have great kosher restaurants. And New York Jews seem to be constantly agitating for more of them. We have a problem, and we need to address it. But in LA, there was a couple of years ago, someone tried to throw a brick through the window of Pat's Steakhouse, which was either anti-Semitism or an extremely accurate Yelp review. Because kosher food is in dire straits, as far as I'm concerned. But LA Jews and New York Jews roughly seem the same to me. I'm good. I'm solid. You know, it's so funny. Everyone thinks that their archetype is like the archetype. I was on a 3-week hiking tour in Japan, and this woman, we stopped at this woman's like a restaurant, but it was one woman making the food, and she kept trying to shove food on us. And after the meal ended, she came out and through Google Translate apologized for trying to push food on us. She said, "I'm sorry, I can't help it. I'm a Shinto grandmother." And I was like, everyone thinks theirs is the one, you know? But yeah, I'm good. I've eaten. My mom was like, "Did you shave today? If you're going to see Hillary Clinton." I was like, "No, I forgot." So, and I needed a haircut. I'm wearing a hat all day. But besides that, I'm pretty solid, yeah.
Good. I mean, we're glad to hear that. I want to know about the period, because we were just talking about it with them, with Hillary Clinton and Dr. Joachim Milo, about the last 2 years and how that's been for them. And,
why? Has something been going on?
And, so, I mean, you know, how has it been for you in a way is my question. I mean, and just whether being a comedian in this period, was that a hard thing to navigate? Did a whole lot of areas become kind of taboo and off limits?
It's been very lucrative for me because I direct all of the Houthis music videos. So we've really stepped up production the last couple of years. I'm like, put the GoPro on the front of the boat. It's going to look sick. And also the war has been tough for me because I hate Hamas, but I love Hezbollah. So I've got like 0 friends. And I'm very anti-Israel, but I love Bibi Netanyahu. So I've got like no allies anywhere. Okay. Some people laughing, other people horrified. Look, comedy... Wait, I have my Charlie Kirk jokes in here. Should I go into the... Comedy benefits from... I don't want to insult anyone. I think smart people who like comedy benefit in times of trouble, and dumb people... Dumb people don't, because the subject of the joke and the object of the joke are very different things. Like, for instance, if you're offended, if the idea of doing a joke about the Holocaust feels wrong to you, I think you might not be very bright. Because comedy, to me, is very high stakes. And all of the best, some things are too serious not to joke about. And comedy, when it's done very well, can concisely address things that prose or speeches or even music can't. So I think in some ways it's been a beautiful time for trenchant gallows humor, in the same way that the 25 years after the Holocaust was a real renaissance for Jewish humor. Seriously, think of the producers.
Yeah.
Think of the producers coming out in what, the 1960s? Holocaust survivors were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and the show is about 2 Jewish producers making a fake Adolf Hitler musical for personal gain. And now it's this venerated piece of content, but at the time, you had to understand that, you know, that it was a finely tuned piece of satire about the greed and cynicism of theater producers. And I think, like, really good comedy benefits in times when there are many more ley lines of tension. And so You know, the struggle is actually some of my jokes about this time. I have a joke about anti-Semitism. It's not written. I was kidding. I have a joke about anti-Semitism, and I've been doing it since, like, I guess, end of 2023. And at some point, it's just a joke about how someone said to me, "It's such a tough time to be a Jew," and I was like, "Oh yeah," as opposed to all those super chill times. You know, all those times it's amazing to be Jewish. And it sort of progresses where a relative of mine actually said to me, "It's the worst it's ever been." And I'm like, the worst it's ever been? The worst it's ever been. And like I mentioned that my mom's side suffered an anti-Semitism, a Holocaust, and you know, and my father had a relative who was murdered by Cossacks in 1841, and I go, I want him, my cousin, to meet. And my ancestor's like, "Oh my God, a Jew in the 21st century," and my cousin's like, "It's actually pretty bad." And he's like, "Oh my God, are there still Cossacks around?" He's like, "No, it's just kind of uncomfortable to go to Columbia University some of the time." And my ancestor's like, "Oh my God, there are Jews at Columbia University?" And he's like, "Yeah, a lot of them are self-hating, especially faculty." And he's like, "Wait, there are Jews teaching at Columbia University?" And he's like, "Yeah, but a lot of them criticize the state of Israel." And my ancestor's like, "Oh my God, there's a state of Israel?" And so I've done this thing, and sure, thanks. But the funny thing is, a couple of people have reached out and been like, "My rabbi said the same thing. My rabbi has made the same point." Rabbi David Wolpe, in a couple of months later, in a clip that I didn't see until recently because Rabbi Wolpe sent it to me after he heard about this secondhand, like, they're making the same point. So I think people are finding comfort in humor. And the real challenge for me is, how do I do it in a way that makes sure no one else... It's not the same approach, but Rabbi, in the clip he sent me, it's almost uncanny. Rabbi Wolpe's... someone says, "What gives you hope?" And he's like, "Hope is me talking to my grandfather," and he says, "There's anti-Semitism at Harvard, and I'm experiencing anti-Semitism at Harvard," and the grandfather's like, "You're at Harvard?"
Yeah.
And so it's like a very similar thing. So sometimes I've found myself with overlapping material from comedians. I've never found myself with overlapping material from rabbis in Los Angeles. So that's a bit of a concern. Maybe I'm taking a bit of a turn, a little bit of a turn towards religious, but yeah.
Is there anything you wouldn't touch? Is there anything that's too taboo you're not going to make fun of? Nah.
No, but I don't intend to offend. There's a really famous Anthony Jeselnik is a really brilliant comedian. Says that he quotes someone who, maybe it's like Andy Warhol, who says art is getting away with it. And so sometimes if people are offended, that feels like a craft failure. Do you know what I mean? You haven't quite done the work to put the power lines underground far enough. Yeah. And so I would allude to anything or do a joke about anything if I thought it was making a good point or was a worthwhile punchline. And also, like, all the power's in the third rail. So yeah, I mean, look, my favorite joke, I think I told this on Unholy, is the Holocaust joke of Ice.
Yeah, you should tell it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite joke. It's this guy, I can do it long, but I'll do it short in the interest of time. This guy dies and he goes to heaven and he meets God. And they're chatting, and the guy says to God, "God, would you like to hear a joke?" And God goes, "Oh, sure, I love jokes." And the guy tells God a Holocaust joke. And God says, "I got to tell you, I don't find that joke funny at all." And the guy goes, "Well, I guess you had to be there, huh?" And that joke, and sometimes you tell that joke, I'm not kidding, one of the first times I've ever had an audience laugh at that. But again, and not to insult anyone, only an idiot wouldn't realize that wasn't a great joke. And sometimes people are like, "Does comedy have to be funny?" And I'm like, I don't think so, because that is a joke that isn't necessarily the funniest joke in the world, but it's clearly a great joke. Yeah. Because it sums up...
It's profound.
Seinfeld says that joke is a novel. And it really is. It's like a brilliantly rendered, concise understanding of a paradox. So like, yeah, I don't know that there's anything I wouldn't touch, and also, like, I always thought people who talked about this were pretty shrill, but like, because I'm like, we live in the 21st century. When are comedians actually going to be censored by the government for their jokes? When is it actually going to happen? You've got to be living in crazy times to think that a government is going to weigh in on what a comedian is allowed to say. And now it's actually happened.
Yeah.
And I feel like shocked by that. But like, no jokes should be sent. Like, I watch Gutfeld all the time. It is impressively joke-free, and I'm offended by the content of it. It's one of the worst. It's abominable, and I still think he should be able to go up there and say his same 4 punchlines every single night with no one interfering with him. So, like, I am really shocked to see people actually coming for comedians in 2025. It's astounding.
I'm going to be parochial in this way, which is about Jewish comedy and Jewish comedians. And there's different things. But the thing that, I mean, there's many things that set you apart from other comedians, and certainly in terms of other Jewish comedians.
Okay, yes.
Well, the thing I had in mind was that you talk about the Jewish experience, and even the Jewish religion.
What does that mean? Like Tay-Sachs disease? What are you talking about? Like, what's the...
Well, I mean, most don't talk about the stuff you talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like, I talk about what it means to be Jewish, as opposed to like Jews are like this and non-Jews are like that, because I also wasn't raised. Like, whenever anyone asks me, like, people ask me sometimes, like, we talked about this.
Yes, I think people was me. I asked you if your parents wish you were a doctor or a lawyer. You mocked me for like 10 minutes after I asked you that question.
Just never got that. Like, who wants their kid to be a lawyer in 2025? You want your kid, you have a precious child, you put them through Hebrew day school, you took them to other extracurriculars, you got them through Ramaz, you did all this bullshit, and you want them to sit at a desk and look over, like, what? Like a lease for a Shell station in Pennsylvania? Like, this is what you raised your tatala for? Like, this is insane. You want your kid to be a dancer.
Yes.
Right, wow, that O from the audience is disturbing. This is the cycle of immigration. You're a grocer, so your kid can be an accountant, so their kid could be a DJ, and start it all over again. We're in the DJ stage. DJ Moishi, Uncle Moishi in the, you know.
Noted.
Did Uncle Moishi and the Mitzvah Men make it?
That was the second time you mocked me for a question.
It's not
Same
you.
question.
It's this. I hate archetypes. People always, there's some fucking book out about, part of my Yiddish. There's some book about how, like, Jewish humor is dying. And with due respect to the author, who I'm sure spent some time in a library, this is a good thing. What Jewish humor is not dying. Shtick is dying. Catskills humor is dying because the Catskills have died. So what's the point of keeping this tummular humor when the tumulars are gone? Like, Judaism has evolved as all American, like, faiths and ethnicity and ethnic groups have evolved. So let's have a comedy that reflects the Jews that we are now, so we're not stuck in this Jackie Mason bullshit that we've had for such a long... no disrespect. Fine, you're hissing, but, like... Go see Jackie Mason if you like it so much.
So you don't agree with, like, Franklin Foer that the age of American Jews, the golden age, is over?
We have a new golden age. We're living in new, incredible Jewish moments. Obviously, there are challenges. Obviously, this is an embattled community. It's always been an embattled community. And obviously there are intense geopolitical conflicts that we're concerned with. There are huge existential issues. We've always had huge existential issues. There are brilliant Jewish art. Taffy Brodesser Akner is writing brilliant books. Etgar Keret is still doing really incredible stories. There are Jewish filmmakers. There are Jewish musicians. There are Jewish academics that are of a quality that is as good as we've ever had. And Franklin Foer, by the way, is a brilliant thinker. I would argue, and aren't there like 4 Foer brothers, and aren't all of them accomplished in crazy ways? Isn't there like Josh, Franklin, Jonathan, and the other one? Like, isn't there?
The black sheep.
Yeah, he's a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. But we live in a golden age of Judaism. We are moving out of a comfortably siloed age of Judaism, where Jewish accomplishment and Jewish and Jewish spaces were much easier, more comfortable to delineate. But Jews are as essential to the American cultural and political sphere and academic sphere and medicinal sphere as they've ever been. And I don't see any reason that will go away. But that's just my 2 cents. So.
And I hear they're doing wonders for leases for Shell stations in Pennsylvania. But you have, one of the things you said that I think surprised a lot of people on our podcast was that you have a really deep connection with Israel. You spent serious time there.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to qualify something. My father is a brilliant doctor, my mother is a brilliant lawyer. So no shade to those 2 things. So I want to say, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So you talked about your
continue with your snare. Go ahead.
So you talked about your time in Israel, that you spent serious time there at actually quite a serious time. I think it was during the Second Intifada. You were there very young.
One of the top 2 intifadas for my money.
Hollywood often seems from a distance, those of us who are not there, you're now in a TV show called The Paper. It's, you're in that world.
Thanks for people who have Peacock. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys.
That was one of the other 4
Isn't
brothers.
TV awesome?
That's Kevin Foer being like, yeah.
So from the outside, Hollywood often seems a bit like Colombia, which we were talking about before, meaning quite a hostile environment for Jews who, like you, feel bound up with Israel in a strong way. Is that wrong?
I can't speak globally. My complication with Israel seems largely interior. My life around Israel and Palestine, in so much as there's a very intense and complicated conflict going on, troubles me greatly, but very little of that has to do with how much work I do or don't get. I'm sure there are some people who are irritated at me because I'm not sufficiently vocal on either side or certain about... I've always been my show was about finding empathy for white nationalists. I'm a very empathy forward comedian. And so I have not found a certainty that lets me dehumanize huge swaths of people. And yeah, there are folks who are upset at me politically on either side. And I'm sure some of those people exist in Hollywood and don't want to work with me or spend time with me, but seems like a relatively minor side effect of a huge conflict. So but yeah, whether or not there's a systematic problem with Jews, I don't know. You probably
have feeling it. That's the point. You're not feeling it in Hollywood.
I think I feel it in all my interactions, but have I worried professionally about it? No, but I would take that as anecdotal evidence as opposed to a sign of some comprehensive problem or non-problem within Hollywood.
I don't know if to drag you into the quagmire of Unholy.
No, you can ask me literally whatever you want.
Into the Unholy regular weeks in which we choose our chutzpah award of the week or our mensch of the week. Do you have anything that comes to mind in any of those categories?
Chutzpah. How about mensch? Let's do some mensches. How about the fact that just because I mentioned like Taffy Ackner, we're living in like a really interesting time where a lot of our dynamic and rigorous Jewish thought leaders are women, like Sarah Hurwitz, Angela Buchdahl, Taffy. Like it'd be really, really amazing to see. And by the way, I worry a little bit that like America has not quite had a Jonathan Sachs since Rev. Joseph Soloveitchik passed away in the 90s. And it would be nice to see it'd be nice to see a man, for a male rabbi for once. It'd be nice to have a male rabbi who...
or a male president for once.
Yeah,
cool. That would be nice.
I think menschettes.
Menschettes.
You put a hey at the end to indicate feminine, but mensa? Mensa? Okay, but yeah, I think we have lots of really cool...
He speaks English. He's English, so we can
how about Sarah Hurwitz? Sarah Hurwitz is immense. Do people know who Sarah is? Sarah's amazing. She's unbelievable. She was a speechwriter for, what's the lady who was? Hillary Clinton. And Michelle Obama and many, many others, and has written a book called As a Jew, which, by the way, I think is a very strident like polemic about about Jewish identity in America in 2025. But her book Here All Along is one about her discovering her own Judaism, is one of the most interesting and thoughtful bits of writing about.
Great nomination. Let's do just a last thing we did to reprise something we loved doing with you when you came on the podcast. For people who didn't hear it, the old famous Lenny Bruce gag.
Hold on. Chutzpah is Jackie Mason. I want to lose this audience even more than I did previously.
They're gone. They're lost.
So we did a sort of homage to the old famous Lenny Bruce joke when he would go through lists of things, Jewish, Goyish, Jewish, Goyish. And we did it about, of all things, the Jewish festivals. And we just, I don't know how this happened.
Upset. I said Yom Kippur wasn't Jewish.
You said Yom Kippur wasn't Jewish, yes. You had an explanation
I got
for
3
that.
letters in the mail from people who were upset.
I remember you said Shavuot couldn't possibly be Jewish because there was too much dairy.
Yep.
But just remind people, what was your reason why Yom Kippur was not Jewish?
Okay. Clean slates are not Jewish. If you want a clean say, can I interest you in Jesus Christ? Like, we just don't wipe it clean. You can pretend you're going to. I was forming new grudges in Shul during Kol Nidre. I was like, that guy smells, that guy's loud, that guy's shuckling, like he's performing, shut up.
So we want to run with that a bit. We thought because we had Hillary Clinton with us before, we would put a twist on this. We want to go through recent American presidents, and you tell us Jewish or Goyish. Okay?
Okay.
That's the game we want to play. So we're going to go back a long time. We're just going to do...
It's tough because George Bush, choking on a pretzel is so Jewish, but clearing brush isn't Jewish at all, and owning the Texas Rangers is the least Jewish thing possible. So it's so let's say he's Reconstructionist, which is Jewish and not. So let's
All right, that's him.
How about Reagan?
What?
Ronald Reagan, Jewish or not Jewish?
I think Ronald Reagan is a socialist, so I think Ronald Reagan. Well, founding the Screen Actors Guild, the most popular and profitable union in the history of the United States, is a bit lefty for me, but yeah, I think let's put him as like one of the great Jewish lefties, you know, sort of in the. This crowd is just loving me. Sort of like the Emma Goldman of his time, you know. Okay. So yeah, let's say he's Jewish.
That's niche. Barack Obama, Jewish or Goyish?
Harvard Law School's Jewish. Shooting 3-pointers without jumping is pretty Jewish. I think Obama's Jewish. Yeah, let's put him in.
So you know where we're leading with this, right? Obviously.
What?
Donald Trump, Jewish, not Jewish.
Do you know the joke that I like to... you know, guys, the difference between Donald Trump and a Reform rabbi is that Donald Trump has Jewish grandchildren. So Dalifne Miyata. But yeah, is Donald Trump Jewish? I can't bring myself even in a joke. Do you know what he did say though? He said no, but he has a couple of Jewish. He has a couple of Jewish rants or he has a couple of rants in his you know when he gets up and he does his stand up, he. Do you know when he does stand up in front of the generals or the UN or whatever?
Yeah.
You know appropriate venues for stand up comedy. Donald Trump occasionally will be like, and why don't we have Coca-Cola? At some point he was like, why don't we have Coca-Cola with no high fructose corn syrup? And I'm like, you mean kosher La Pesa? Is this guy advocating for kosher Rapasa over Coca-Cola right now? Also, I think there's nothing more Jewish than plowing ahead with the renovation with no plans for how it's going to end. There's nothing. It's giving Massachusetts Shoal in 2006. All right, we've got the land. We don't have an architect yet. We've started demolishing the community center. But yeah, I think Donald Trump has some Jewish qualities, but I can't countenance that. That amount of Boca Grandma spray tan is very Jewish to me. There's a lot there. But I can't do that.
You answered the question in full, Alex.
It's like Mussolini's Jewish, but Hirohito's not. Like yeah, okay.
I weirdly follow that logic.
Alex, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, guys. So good to see you again.
I always love talking to him on the podcast, and it was fun to do it in front of a large audience and to see how they all reacted to him. One thing that resonates with me, he said so many smart things, but I think the fact that he says, no, this is a golden Jewish age, and he gave examples, and I think that is something to sort of hold on to, as we are sometimes encumbered by a lot of things that are worrying to us. This is something I think that we should hold on to.
Yeah, that was a great riff of his, and it did go down really well. In the room, as did the whole spot with him. It was a joy to be with him on stage in New York, and I think we got there ahead of Carnegie Hall, where he played to a huge crowd a matter of days later. So he is such a big star, and we were thrilled to have him on. It's time for our awards. I think the chutzpah field is characteristically crowded this week. Can I offer one from my own neck of the woods here in the United Kingdom? If you look at any opinion polls at the moment, the man tipped to be Britain's next prime minister is Nigel Farage, who is the leader of the party Reform UK, this kind of insurgent nationalist populist party. It only has 5 members of parliament at the moment, but the polls show it way ahead, and it has been ahead for a long time. Labour government in big trouble, Conservative Party nowhere. So Reform UK is the coming force. Nigel Farage has been its leader from the beginning. The Guardian, the newspaper where I work, my own newspaper, has been leading with some remarkable reporting, speaking to large numbers of people who were at school with Nigel Farage, obviously when he was a teenager, much younger man, and some really hair-raising revelations have emerged from that, in which he is accused of having behaved in a racist and anti-Semitic way, and to have said racist and anti-Semitic things, bullying Jewish pupils, stomping around the school, saying Hitler was right, and making life really a misery for Jewish and Asian, non-white pupils at the school. This was Dulwich College, a prestigious public school in London. The allegation is that he would, chant the name of Oswald Mosley, 1930s leader of British Union of Fascists, that he would do the Hitler chant. He had a whole song involving "Gas Them All," with lyrics talking in the most brutal ways about Jews. You can imagine the rest. The point about this is there will be some who say, look, he was a kid, you can't judge somebody for what he did as a child, and anyway, there's no documentary hard proof. This is just the testimony, admittedly, of many, many pupils, all of whom say the same thing. The problem a little bit is that there has been a change in how Nigel Farage responds to this. When confronted about rumours like this in the past, he would always say, well, we all do stupid things when we were young, and it's a long time ago. Now he's, perhaps because he's mindful that he's on his way to Downing Street, if the polls are right, he's saying that this is wholly untrue, baseless, no truth in it, going against, a large number of people who have come forward to say this is exactly what they remember. So that's a difference. I think if he did say, I behaved appallingly and it was terrible and I regret it very deeply, I don't know whether the story would have anywhere to go, but his denial is really, challenging to people who listen to the testimony of these people, many of whom say they are still scarred by it. One documentary filmmaker said it really had, a Jewish filmmaker had said had never been spoken to this way at any other time, and he still remembered it, even though he was obviously a child at the time. So that's a chutzpah nominee, the young Nigel Farage, if these allegations are borne out for his racist and anti-Semitic behaviour and words as a much younger man.
I kind of want to ask you if you think this will hurt him politically.
I think it will. I mean, depending on where it goes, if it is just brushed off, and he manages to succeed in this denial, then maybe not. But I think there are still a whole lot of voters who are just affronted by this kind of behavior. And the reason why I say it with some confidence like that is we did see that in the Jeremy Corbyn period. This, of course, remind people he was the leader of Labour between 2015 and 2020, mired in allegations not about his childhood or his youth, but about his conduct as an adult, where he appeared to turn a blind eye to racist language or behaviour rather than engaging in it directly himself. But various remarks, things he said. And Labour was really mired in this problem of anti-Semitism. And I sat in focus groups myself, where voters in areas where no Jews live, people, British working class voters who have no direct contact with Jews, felt this was somehow un-British to speak this way about Jews, and it counted against him. And if this gets more traction and more legs and is seen to be more credible, then I think it would hurt Nigel Farage. And, he's very popular with his base, but to be Prime Minister, he needs to go beyond his base. And I think those people don't like this stuff. Stressing again, Nigel Farage denies it all. We must give equal or large weight to that. But there is the testimony of people who remember him, and it's very detailed.
So one more chutzpah nominee, if I may, coming from my neck of the woods. As we know, the coalition here announced that it was setting up its own commission of inquiry into the failure surrounding Hamas's invasion of Israel on October 7th. We talked about this last week as well. I think the chutzpah nominee being Minister Amichai Eliyahu, who said that now we should say this, it is the ministers who will decide the mandate of this kind of inquiry. And he said what we will check is also the judicial system, who weakened our deterrence. And he also says we should check whatever happened since the Oslo Accords. That is 30 years back. So you understand that the notion here is just, kicking the can down the road. It doesn't seem to many people, and the vast majority of Israelis who are calling for an inquiry, a commission of inquiry into this, it doesn't seem like it's a serious thing to say. Shall we lighten the mood, or at least make ourselves feel better with a Mensch Award this week?
I think we should, and I think you've got a good nominee.
Yes. So the nominee is Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. Once in the far distant past, she was in our Chutzpah Award column to show you that in life, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're up. You never know. But in this case, we are giving her the award. She was in Israel this week. She received the honorary doctorate from the Weizmann Institute for her support of Israel. We should say that she went to Nachal Oz, and there were no cameras there. The reason we know this is because Amir Tibon, correspondent of Haaretz, and also resident of Nachal Oz, wrote about this. He met with her. He said how she toured the kibbutz and the Nova site for hours, talking to people, asking them, wanting to see where he himself was trapped for hours with his own family, being very, very sympathetic. I think we should note that. I mean, look, she doesn't hold any official office anymore. The fact that she spent the time, wanting to hear, asking the people who went through this terrible disaster what they went through, I think that is something that we should definitely note.
I think so. We can never be accused on Unholy of being followers of fashion, because Angela Merkel is now out of fashion, because she is seen to have called it wrong in terms of German dependence on Russian energy. And indeed, her big open door policy to migrants is now very unpopular in Germany. So a lot of people are reconsidering the Merkel chancellorship. But I think the point you make, which is that she's no longer in office, she's not courting or wooing votes. The fact she did this visit without cameras, and as you say, many hours spent there, I think it's right to recognise that she didn't have to do it. It pops into my head because the book I have written is about Germans who did good things that they didn't have to do, and that there was really nothing to gain. Here is yet another example of that. So even if it's out of step with current thinking and out of fashion, we are boldly deviating from what is vogue. And,
Wondering how you're selling our
nominating
podcast to people, right? We're out of fashion. We're on do the unpopular thing. I don't know. He doesn't
Yeah,
mean
we're
style-wise.
brave and
Style-wise,
courageous.
we're very much in fashion. We just
Yes, I shouldn't have said
we're
we,
original
should I?
thinking.
Because you, of course, are a style icon. But I do not make that claim for myself. So I should really speak for myself on these matters. Yeah, I think we have done our awards. We probably have a thank you to Dispatch.
Huge thank
Should we
you
mention
to Michal
as well?
Porat, who's also always in style. Yes, Jonathan.
And also we should just mention for our subscribers and friends of the podcast, bonus material. There is a, I think, longer than usual bonus episode marking November as the month 30 years on from the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. We really get into that in that conversation, talking about him, the life, the man, as well as the assassination and all the consequences and fallout from that. So that's a substantial bonus episode. If you are a friend of the podcast, a subscriber, that is the way to listen to that conversation. I thought it was a very full and sort of revealing conversation. So do listen to that. And yes, as you say, we've thanked Michal, and we will see each other next time.